Thank you. My name is Andrew Browning with HBW Resources. My panelists will be Kim McHugh, Vice President of Rockies Business Unit with Chevron, David Keyte, CEO of Caerus Oil and Gas, and Hodge Walker, COO of Civitas. We're going to talk a little bit about Colorado leadership in the energy and environment realm. And I'm going to start off with a little kind of statement. It's not something actually I made up specifically for this panel session. It was our submission, an organization that I run called Western States and Tribal Nations Natural Gas Initiative. It was our submission to the BLM-RMP for the Colorado River Valley and Grand Junction resource management plans, as well as I took a little bit of a recent op-ed I wrote in the Grand Junction Sentinel countering assertions that we should not be exporting LNG, using Colorado gas for LNG exports for environmental reasons. So Colorado has led the nation with the first oil and gas methane regulations established in 2014. More recently, the Colorado Air Quality Control Commission adopted a new rule requiring direct measurement of methane emissions and demonstrating with real-world data that oil and gas operators are meeting emissions reduction standards. Under our leading regulations, Colorado companies are producing some of the least methane emission-intense natural gas in the world, at roughly 1/10 the prevailing industry intensity. Just as organic food commands a higher price, cleaner gas is beginning to attract a premium. Any good product can find an export market, but not all exports can do environmental good. With cleaner energy, we can literally export Colorado's environmental standards, lower national and global emissions, and help other states and nations build better lives for their people. At the same time, we create durable jobs and rural economic development and empower sovereign tribal nations to control their destinies. So that's what this panel is all about. It's about Colorado's energy environmental leadership. What are the challenges? What are we doing right? And how we can lead the nation and the world in clean energy development. So I'll turn it over to my panelists just to give a quick bio on themselves and just a little bit what they'd like to share.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm Kim McHugh, the Vice President for the Rockies Business Unit. Last time I was here with you all, I think I had been 5 days on the job. So I know a little bit more today than I did a year ago. But I came to Colorado a year ago. I always like to say I'm a family of oil field. I'm a second-generation driller. I'm also the mother of 2 daughters who are entering the industry. So I believe in what we do. I think what we do is a noble industry, and we should be proud of what we do. I believe in the cause that we need to provide affordable, reliable, ever cleaner energy. And I think in Colorado, we really do have the chance to show the world what it looks like to have industry and regulators partner together. We're not there yet, but we have that opportunity to be different and do it in a different way. And I believe, providing for the state, meeting the regulations, they're tough. I would love to see us let us put the things in place and see if they work without continuing change and more and more and more. But I do believe we have an opportunity to show the world and provide what we've done and how we do it to the rest of not just the U.S., but also the world. So I'm excited to talk about this today because I think the opportunities are huge. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
I'm Dave Keyte. I'm the CEO of Caerus Oil and Gas. And I founded this company in 2009, and since that point in time, we've accumulated a significant position in the western slope in eastern Utah. We're the largest landowner in Mountain West, and we provide about 7% of the natural gas needed by the western gas markets, which is a gas market that serves a GDP bigger than Germany and 3 times the size of Russia. We are deeply invested in this community. All around here is us. And we believe strongly that natural gas has a vital role in the energy equation in the western United States.
Thank you. Hodge.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Hodge Walker. I'm the COO of Civitas. It's a company that was founded here in Colorado, bringing together 5 smaller companies. It's the first carbon net neutral oil and gas producer in the state of Colorado. We've got assets in the DJ Basin, and we also have assets within the Midland and the Permian Basins in both Texas and New Mexico. Been a part of oil and gas in the state of Colorado since 2018. I've seen a lot of changes, seen some real good gains in what we do as an industry and how we collaborate with our regulatory partners and our policymakers. We got a lot more work to do. It really is, in my mind, how do we really truly define the problems we're trying to solve and then collaborate with each other to come up with those solutions? Allow the rules and regulations to go and be put into place, allow us to operate and regulate within that environment, collect the information, assess the process, see what we've gained, and then make appropriate changes there. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks so much. The conversation is going to start local, but we're really going to look at, and I think this is teeing up our keynote speaker today, where Colorado fits in that kind of global geopolitical energy and climate change puzzle. But as the adage goes, everything is local, right? And with Colorado's leadership, its strong, its strict regulations. What are the challenges? We touched on a little bit, but specific challenges operating on the ground, and what can we do to improve them in order to meet the goals and objectives that have been set for industry? Maybe Kim, you can take a first crack at it.
Sure. So, the picture changed after I spoke with you all. We acquired PDC Energy. So today we are producing over 400,000 barrels a day in the state of Colorado. So we are the biggest operator in the state. So these local issues are very near and dear to us. The things that pop up to me very quickly is permits. And we keep talking about that. But in order to really secure where you're going to be 3, 4, 5 years out, we need to be able to have more security in getting those permits and how we work together. In November, we submitted, and it took 100 days before we got an acknowledgement that they had received them. So that's not even yet where we're getting our hearings to talk about in the reviews. So that's a problem for us. And how we can, work with our power suppliers. We need to be able to tell them where we're going, what we're going to need as we continue to electrify our operations. That's a problem. And it continues to be a problem. So I think there is an opportunity there locally that we need to figure out how to, I'm going to say streamline, and that doesn't mean make it easier, take away what's needed, but we need to get this to a place where you understand what's needed, you put that forward, you can get through the process without so much back and forth and more and more requirements than are really out in the regulations. Mm-hmm. And then I do think some of the things being required, if you think of the NOx, so 2035, we've got that. We don't have the 2050. And you got to have the technology to get you there. And we don't know how we're going to get there yet. And so that's, to me, is allow what you've put in place to work and see what happens. But even at that, if we get new technology and we want to put it in place and we have to go open our permits again, although you're trying to do the right thing and it takes you back in the process to work your way through, that's, again, a problem in the system. And I think that's what worries me the most. And sorry on the dates, it's like 2025 and 2030, so apologies on that. But I think the process needs, what's the intent? The intent is to improve emissions. Mm-hmm. And if you can do things and make it better and improve those emissions, opening your permit that's taken you 1.5 years, 2 years to get, makes you question, do you do that? Or do you put that in the next round of permits? And so that's not really helping us all do the right thing. And I think that's this whole working together in the system.
Yes. David.
I echo everything that was just said.
That's why I like going first.
The permitting is difficult. The regulatory framework is unsettled. And so when you try to put a plan together and you talk to your regulatory team and you've got 2 or 3 rig lines that you're trying to manage, and say, well, what's the timing on this permit? Well, somewhere between 5 and 9 months. That doesn't cut it for us. We can't work that way. We have to have more certainty. And I echo that we don't want to do anything wrong. We just want to know the rules.
Yeah.
And if we know the rules, then we can abide by them. Another complicating factor for us, because we're only west slope, we are not front range, is that we have wildlife strips. We have restrictive windows in which we can construct, and those all have to be folded into 3 to 9 months. It just doesn't work for us. So we have had a great relationship with the ECMC. They have done a great job in trying to understand the issues on the western slope versus the front range, but that's always an overhang when you're trying to make statewide regulation for 2 separate areas that are completely different in the way they operate. And we continue to beat the drum about west slope operations versus front range operations. They are different. So that's just a complicating factor in addition to the permitting unsettledness.
Building off of the uncertainty comment, well, first and foremost, agree on the permitting. There are a lot of challenges there. The relative uncertainty does create issues associated with schedules, timing, service providers, and lining out all that work. But it gets back to the other point I wanted to mention was just along the lines of the uncertainty around regulations. I think this industry has done a tremendous job of being able to meet a high bar. The challenge is the bar's moving. Where was the bar? Where is the bar? Where's the bar going? Every legislative session, we have mandates of new rules that are either modifying or revising rules that are in rulemaking or are being implemented. So chasing a bar that's moving doesn't allow the rules to take effect. It doesn't allow us to be able to implement and regulate around those rules and really truly see where are we making progress? How is that progress moving forward? Where do we still have challenges? Use the data, use the processes to understand where we need to modify and where we need to go a little bit further. So the regulations don't only create confusion from an operations standpoint, the moving regulations also create confusion with regards to the investment community. They see risk associated with our ability to conduct business because the rules are always changing and not being clear on what is the long-term viability of the industry and the way that it's moving forward.
Yeah.
So we've gone at the local level, and let's talk a little bit about kind of national and state and national objectives. I like to call, the press, the current moniker is the energy transition. I like to call it the methane transition. But different states are taking different approaches. States like California are primarily focusing efforts on renewable energy to meet their decarbonization goals and focus on electrifying everything. Is this the right approach? How can Colorado lead? And is Colorado energy, clean energy, natural gas and oil a part of that decarbonization process?
Let them go first.
Okay. Yeah. Hodge?
Sure. I do believe that this state has demonstrated and is leading in lowering greenhouse gas emissions and methane emissions. And it's through some of the most comprehensive and restrictive regulations in the country. Some might argue in the world. And I think we're leading, we're showing how others can do this. The challenge here is what is the appropriate cadence to move forward on reducing the footprint, but yet provide reliable and affordable energy? Make sure we're not leaving anyone behind. We need more energy today than we did yesterday. I'm pretty sure we're going to need more energy tomorrow than we do today. We've got a growing world. We have a world that's demanding energy, and we have a a world of developing countries that are trying to raise the living standards within those countries, and that comes from reliable and affordable energy. The regulations we have here are really allowing us to move forward in a way that is reducing our emissions while actually increasing production. So I think this state is really demonstrating it in that fashion. We have not only the industry, but other businesses that are moving forward. And I know that as policymakers come into new seats, they want to make change, they want to do good. We do too. We as an industry have been demonstrating that. It's really not an us versus them, but what is the problem and how do we work and collaborate together to design an appropriate approach to solving the problem.
Yeah, I think I just want to bring this back into what we do locally. So methane obviously is a big deal, and the attention to that and the spotlight on that has forced us to kind of look introspectively at it, and that's a good thing. We have determined that, in fact, we've been wasting money, not just methane, by acting in the way in which we had. So last year, we replaced or repowered 6,500 pieces of equipment that used to run on gas and emit gas, and now they run on different things. What we've found is, for instance, liquid nitrogen is cheaper to actuate these pneumatic devices than natural gas is. So what the hell are we doing the whole time? I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's forced us to look introspectively, and those 6,500 devices are approximately 20% of the devices that we utilize in Colorado, and all of those will be replaced and repowered over the next 4 to 5 years. That's good for everybody in this room, and it's really good for Caerus as well. So the things that we've done to look introspectively that were forced on us turned out to be something that we needed. It was some hard love, I guess, and it worked. So I think on a local level, it really is something that we need to all take a hard look at, and we do want to leave this world in a better place than what we entered it, but in doing so, you are able to make money doing it as well.
So I'm going to go back to your original question. Do I think it's the right way to do it? No. I think if you look at what California has done, they've over-indexed on one source of energy, and they have not made it a partnership with industry. And so when I start to say partnership, what I'm talking about is not being behind the curtain, but being at the table and truly being a partner in how we approach energy production in the state of Colorado. I don't think what California has done, you would say, is successful. So why is it a model that we would want to go by? I think what you can look at is, we talk about this transition. I've always said I'd love to hear us use the word diversification, because that's what we're doing. We're diversifying your choices for fuel, for energy. And it's not an either or. And for the state of Colorado, a lot of the regulatory stuff has made us move farther. Some of the very things that you were talking about, Dave, we're doing those same things. How do you figure out how to reduce those emissions? How do you, continue to make that impact? But at the end of the day, you have to have a strategy and a practical strategy for where you're going to get to and how you're going to supply this energy. And so what we have seen in California is no permits being distributed anymore. If we think our last week, our mini brownout is nothing compared to rolling blackouts. I had a daughter who actually was in school in Stanford at the time, and we had never heard of such a thing. And there is no heads up, and I think we restocked her fridge maybe 4 or 5 times as these blackouts were rolling through. I don't think we want that. I think we want to have a comprehensive plan that continues to improve the environment and show, when I say show the world, show how industry comes in with the regulators to work this problem, and really, where are we going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now? That's the strategy I want to understand. And it's not we go out of business, shut us down, and miraculously windmills and solar are going to start creating the electricity as we are electrifying this state faster. So, you know, just an example is we had a pad we could not go to because our permits, rightfully, we were electrify highline in our permits with our rigs. And we couldn't get the power there in time. So we were fortunate, you're not always as fortunate to have some flexibility to go somewhere else and do something different. But if our industry is going to rely on the power coming to us and having it in time, then that's a plan that has to be worked together. And we can't do it in an antagonistic way. And so I do think there's some partnering going on, but I think we have a lot more room. And I actually want it to be an open partnership where we can talk about how we're helping. We are reducing these emissions. We're providing this energy. We want to do the right things. Hard to know with your choice on the bar being changed, what you're trying at the time. But no, I don't think the approach California has taken has helped their economy, has helped the lifestyle of the people that live there, have given them affordable, reliable, ever cleaner energy. I was amazed when I moved to Colorado, the price of gasoline. I come from Houston. I thought surely gasoline would be more expensive here. And I drive to Greeley, and it's cheaper in Greeley than it was that I was paying in Houston. Do we want California gasoline prices? I don't think we do, because that means the whole state can't afford it. And we want all boats to rise, you know? So long answer to your question, but I just don't think it's the way to go. And I think we can plot a better course here. We have that opportunity now. We go much further, we are California. And people are moving from California here because they like what you have here. So how do we make sure we maintain that?
There's a couple of key points there that were brought up, and I think one of which I'm a strong believer in as well, is we never know what success looks like.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever defined where we're going, ever. All we know is that we're moving. We don't know when we're going to stop. We don't have a plan to get there because we don't know where we're going. So defining what success might look like would be an interesting thing for the proponents of this energy diversification to point out to us. Just tell us what you're looking at. A couple of key factors in where we're going in terms of electrification. Let's talk data centers. Let's talk about the demand that's coming our way, where the U.S. electricity demand has gone up by 0.6% annually for about 2 decades. It's about to explode. These data centers are consuming inordinate amounts of energy. A data center being placed in Colorado today is about 1 million square feet at a cost of $1,000 a foot. That's $1 billion for a unit. That unit can use up to 200 megawatts. Our field here is 40 megawatts, and that's a 600,000 acre field. It is an immense and concentrated amount of energy that's needed. And it has to be sustainable energy. It cannot be intermittent. Is natural gas really going away? I don't see how. If we're going to be in the AI future, it has to be there. There's no other source right now. So I would encourage those in places in the government to think about what's coming their way, not just what's in front of them. But this artificial intelligence wave is going to be a huge demand on energy, and it has to be non-intermittent. So as we talk about the trouble that the people on this stage have delivering the very product that is needed to service artificial intelligence, just think about where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more points on the California comment. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we need all energy sources. We just do. We have a world that is demanding more energy. One of the things that we see in California, as Kim not only mentioned, but lived with rolling blackouts and brownouts, and oh, by the way, some of the highest energy costs in the entire nation outside of Hawaii. because of exporting their oil and natural gas production and getting that from elsewhere in pursuit of lowering emissions, some of that energy is coming from South America. Doesn't have the same environmental standards that we have here in the United States. Doesn't have the same human rights standards that we have in the United States. If we're truly talking about global emissions, global greenhouse gases, methane, at a global scale, which is what we need to be talking about, exporting your energy from a country that holds itself to a higher environmental standard to lower environmental standards actually has a negative impact on global emissions, not solving the real problem.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up to the global level, because that's where I wanted to take this conversation. Last month, I was a part of a conference put on by the Colorado School of Mines, a Responsible Gas Symposium, that really covered what we're talking about here. Colorado is a leader in responsible gas development and the various metrics and standards. How do we get there? I took part in an international panel, and we hosted the Asian Natural Gas and Energy Association. We had some folks from Thailand come in to be a part of the discussion. And the United States is an energy powerhouse, and that our exports are being counted on by our allies and trading partners in Asia. But also they have their own the Japanese have a very aggressive net zero plan. They have a net zero LNG importing association. How do we work with? So question one: How do we start to export that Colorado model, and how can we connect? Where does Colorado fit in that kind of global geopolitical puzzle?
So I'll start.
Yeah.
I think because we really never recognize where we are yet, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because we really advertise ourselves as we got more to do. We're not there. We're continuously. So it's hard to be in that conversation when you don't even recognize yourself as a leader in where you are and what you've done is good to this point. I was on a panel with Governor Polis not long ago, and I asked him the question, like, when are we going to celebrate? What are we doing? And it's the first time I had heard him say out loud, that on this greenhouse roadmap, oil and gas sector outperforms. Like, that's the word he used, outperforms. Yet we never say that out loud. We never advertise what we're doing. So I think in order to be seen as in the global landscape, what we've done is good, and it's achieving some things that no one else is achieving, we got to recognize it ourselves first as a state. And so I don't think we're going to get on that stage to be able to talk about the priorities and what we've achieved until we ourselves say this is really great. And your point is, I say this all the time, I don't think anybody likes to hear it, there is no Great Wall around Colorado that goes up into the sky, and we clean up these emissions and we are good. Like last time I checked, we had a really bad smog come in from California over the Western Front, right? I mean, like, these are the things, so cleaning up just what we do and not spreading that and helping others achieve it, we're not changing the global landscape at all. And then continuing to push it and push it and push it to really, what's the end game? I always ask people, what's the end game? Well, I know our end game, but there's people whose end game out there is we go away. How does that help the world? Because somebody else is going to fill that pipeline. Somebody else is going to provide that natural gas. Somebody else can provide that energy. And Colorado is no different than any place else in the world. Our craving for energy in this state goes up year on year, to your point, and we want to welcome in all of this. I don't know why people think, the cloud is a cloud. No, it actually has emissions associated with it, and everything you store and every video has an emissions footprint. And in some ways, that's more than my frac locations. The emissions are higher, but nobody talks about that. So your point, global, if Colorado wants to be a global leader, we got to say what we're doing is great. We got to advertise what we're doing and celebrate the successes versus beating ourselves up and continuing to move the goalpost, and we can't ever get there. So we can't even see if what we're doing, the difference it's made to be able to stop and go, this is good. So I think that we're going to struggle there until we recognize it ourselves.
I think to export more, you have to produce more.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
To produce more, you have to have the support of the state. If the state does not want us to lead the globe, we won't lead the globe. If the state will continue to suppress supply provided by Colorado, we will continue to not support the globe. It's really local.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't want to, it's we can't.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest companies in the world in oil and gas, this is not meant to be critical at all. This is just a point. 2 rigs running in the state. 2 rigs.
No, I have 4.
4.
4.
4 rigs running in the state.
Super efficient, I will say.
Fair. But the state of Utah has more rigs running in it than the state of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be clear about what is restraining us from increasing supply.
And even worse, we will transition one of those rigs to our to MidCon, our Midland-based, because of permits.
So,
And it's efficient, so we can achieve that 400,000 barrels a day with 3 of what we did with 4. But if we could get more permits and have a kind of the surplus, we might be having a different conversation on the capital that we're putting into the state. So you're right. I mean, it's,
you have to get the buy-in from the state.
yeah.
If
great
that's
point.
true, if we want to export more, we can do it. Just tell us that's the goal and help us.
I'm going to bring up the national spectrum now, and this is, and we've touched on it a little bit, but the Biden administration's pause on LNG. It is a, so for anyone that in the audience that is not familiar with this, the Biden administration recently announced a pause in permitting new LNG export projects and is considering making substantive changes to the public interest review process used by the Department of Energy when considering applications of LNG. And it's really they want to consider the environmental impacts. I'm sure that there will be Secretary Granholm announced that this will only take a year, but how do we influence the Biden administration on it's something it's really kind of a crass political calculation, I think. What can we bring to bear to shape thoughts on policy?
I think taking a step back and truly understanding what is the environmental impact of the natural gas. We've talked about it here over several different comments. It is a global perspective. Mm-hmm. We have a growing world. We have a growing population, and in many parts of this world, electric generation is being generated by much higher emitting, higher footprint energy sources. Exporting U.S., Colorado, natural gas that's held to a much higher environmental standard, providing that to countries that are looking to grow their populations, their communities, and their business centers, and giving them a foundation of natural gas to replace coal-fired power generation, and it's affordable and it's reliable, creates a foundation for a society and countries to grow economically. With that foundation of reliable and affordable energy, you can expand the energy equation. You can start to bring in renewables. You can start to expand the calculus on that energy equation, but it has to start with a foundation. The natural gas that's coming out of this country that is shipped around the world provides security and reliability to nations all over the place. Mm. And if we're talking about global emissions, that has an extremely positive impact on global emissions. If you look at the ozone in the state of Colorado, 70% of the ozone that we experience here in the state of Colorado is out of our control or comes from outside the state. If we make an impact to NOx precursors to ozone in other parts of the world. That benefits the world, and it also benefits Colorado.
Is there an opportunity? I talked specifically about the Asian Natural Gas and Energy Association. Chevron is one of the primary founders of that organization. How do we tell the story of what's going on at the local level, at the state, and make this a global effort?
It is a global effort.
Yeah.
The problem is we have politicized energy.
Yeah.
And we politicized it in our country, and then it impacts those who don't have what we have. And so right there, to your point, is how do we have these conversations? It's very difficult when the starting point is we're bad. Okay, so I think that whole having the conversation, we're there, we're knocking on doors. We have a huge staff that sits in Washington, D.C. trying to help us with this. And, a lot of people, when it comes to LNG, they want to talk about the money you make in exporting. But let's go back to your comment, which is really important, Hodge. It is cleaner energy than what they're using today. I lived in Thailand for 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know what a bad smog day looks like. I have watched people burning coal in fire pits on the streets to cook with, not propane tanks, coal. So this energy that we're sending changes lives. And so for us to stop that from a political standpoint versus really how do we make an impact, I don't know how you get over that piece. I wish I had the answer, because if I did, I would try to go to Washington and change it myself. But exporting clean energy to places that don't have it, I mean, we've been sending as a country to our allies. So when Russia attacked Ukraine and Europe was having problems, that LNG, a lot of it was exported from the United States. So what we did helped people. I mean, that was a struggle in Europe, and the U.S. was part of that solution. So to just pause, I don't know what that really means,
Yeah.
The exporting of that, then we're actually doing harm. We're doing harm to those outside of our country. And so I hope we can get to a place where greater minds will come to a solution. But I think right now it's a political and not a global, we're solving a global problem. So.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I was at I went to CERAWeek in last month and was lucky enough to get into an energy security forum that was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce, the Eurogas, which is the European LNG Association, Asian Natural Gas Association, all our G7 partners, but they also had some African representatives, and it was great to get the Asian perspective and the African perspective, because their ambitions are really just to electrify and just to get energy.
They want what we have.
Right.
I mean, look, if you have not taken it, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Chris Wright with Liberty. And those Bettering Human Lives books that are out there, I read them cover to cover. Like, it's brilliant. And it talks about what other places need and people who are in poverty. And, he and I have talked about some of the technology that they're working with people. How do you get propane to someone who can't afford that propane tank that day? I mean, there's just work going on. So when we step back and look at what we have, how clean it is, the environment that we live in, who are we to say they don't deserve the same thing, right? And they're supposed to jump from coal and dung to solar and wind. And yet there's this amazing clean resource in between those two in natural gas. And it's a fascinating, if you get one, read it. It gives you great pointers when you get stopped in a Old Navy or a taxi driver who wants to discuss your industry.
Yeah.
And you can talk to it from the point of passion. Because I started this saying, this is a noble industry. And it is. I'm proud that my father was in this industry. I'm proud that I'm in this industry. My husband is in this industry. And my kids are following in this industry. Because they know this is needed. And they come at it from a different perspective. And, they're from my daughter, I told you, at Stanford. I'll tell you funny, her friends made fun of her at Stanford on why would you ever go work for the oil and gas? And she goes like, you're really changing life with a thumbs up on Facebook? Come on, you know? And yet that was their whole goal. I love it, right? But that was their whole, thank you. Yeah, it was an awesome statement. But their whole goal is to go work for these social media techies. And at the end of the day, their social media app doesn't work without us. So this whole connection is missing, you know?
Yeah, I think on the pause on LNG, we are exporting clean air. That's what we're exporting.
Oh, that's a good point.
Would you put a pause on us exporting wheat? Would you put a pause on us exporting medical supplies? Why would you put a pause on an absolute human necessity like energy? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
No godly reason, nothing.
It is in that same forum, the same conference, the State Department and the Department of Energy were there as well, and listened to these global reflections on the pause. And one thing it was a striking fact to me that, and you mentioned our airlift of LNG. You know, I liken it to the Berlin airlift of the 1960s. Our ability to supply our European partners when they embargoed Russian gas because of the war. But that came at a cost. I did not know that some of those cargoes were diverted from developing countries like Bangladesh, and they had brownouts, and they had to shut down their economy. So, I mean, what we're talking about in you know, these conversations, you know, we had one last night, you know, it revolves around the social, the political, and you know, really the mindset of the younger generation. And I think these types of narratives are something that the industry needs to embrace more and bring in and have people understand the global impacts, the global reflections of what we do, and let other people tell those stories. I walked away just you know, feeling really good about our efforts when you listen to the African representatives and you listen to the head of the Asian Natural Gas and Energy Association talk about energy in a perspective that I could tell it was, you know, a point of view that people had not thought about before. And I think it's really important for our industry to be able to invest in that narrative. And this is a global issue. We are a part of the global solution, and we need to get out there and tell that story in a meaningful way. That, you know, if it is a crass political calculation by the Biden administration to appeal to a younger generation that is focused on climate, we need to find a way to tell that story, because I think it will shape opinion. Before, I think we have about a little over 10 minutes. Before we go to Q&A out here, does anybody want to wrap up thoughts on this?
Let's go to the crowd.
Okay, let's go to the crowd early for Q&A. Any questions for our esteemed panel? Over here.
Like I did last year, I think I want to commend you guys for what you do for the hydrocarbon society we live in. If you look at it, I think 1800s, 200 years ago or so, we were at 1 billion people. I think it's no coincidence that when we started going to hydrocarbons, humans started flourishing, and now we're up to 8 billion people, right? So I guess my question is just kind of what you were talking about, Andrew, was how do you go to the STEM programs, the middle schools, and start educating people of where electricity comes from that socket there? It's a secondary source, but it has to be generated. How do you educate the younger people? I think it should be required that every person should take an energy course, you know, along with a science course at mid-school and even elementary school. So how do you propose educating people on the importance of the hydrocarbon society we live in?
Well, I think Scott Tinker had a great point last year. And he had even written a course that he gave to environmental classes, right? The problem is you need a balanced conversation to go in, right? And so if we, oil and gas, approach it, obviously we're greenwashing, and so somehow you have to have a curriculum that recognizes the source, understands the science behind the BTUs, how energy is created. I agree with you. I think it should be a requirement. I think the problem is that the NGOs got to it ahead of us and started early. So when you look at high school classes, when they start to look environmental classes are taught with a very leaning against our industry right from the beginning. One of my kids took one and brought the stuff home, and I was just up in arms, like, okay, you're going to have a balance, I'm going to beat it into you. And we had to have that conversation because he's getting one side of information, and I wanted him to have data, facts, to make his own, conversation. So we do have to start early because they do not recognize the fact that iPhone in their hand, they plug it in, but nobody cares what those prongs actually go back to and how that energy was created or how the phone is made, how their tennis shoes are made, how medicine is made. So you started with people now live longer, the population is bigger. What we do improves human lives. That's not a, it's a fact. But how you get into it, how you bring that conversation in, I do think we need more education. And I think we need others to help us tell that story because it doesn't work, unfortunately, when we tell it because we're the bad guys.
I think Kim brings up a really good point, and Scott Tinker's great at doing this. I don't have the solution on how you do that, but it has to be a balanced conversation. Where does energy come from? Yeah. Oil and gas is an energy source. Wind is an energy source. What are the costs? How are renewable energy tools manufactured? Where do those resources come from? It is a full equation. It's not just wind, it's also the mining necessary to build the solar panels. It's the manufacturing, it's disposal. Just like from an oil and gas perspective, it's building a pad, it's drilling a well, it's completing a well, it's producing a well, and ultimately doing reclamation and returning that land back to the way it was. The entire equation, understanding the whole process, and being able to have an intellectually honest dialogue around what are we doing, what do we need, and how do we do it the best way with the lowest impact.
That all takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Right? And in today's world, that doesn't cut it. People that are against us, and it's an industry. Yep. The anti-oil and gas business is an industry. It's odd that it's only in the United States, isn't it? But it's an industry that is well-funded and is a formidable opponent. And they are masters at the clicks. Mm-hmm. They don't lay out a strategy. They don't lay out why their plan is better. They don't have to. They just click. And it's immediate and it's emotional, and that's their strategy. To do what we're proposing here on this stage, which is the appropriate way to go about it, time, effort, kids don't have time for that. Yeah. They're masters at the social media, and I'm not sure we can get there.
Because if you think they've been educating them a long time, so the clicks work today.
Many clicks.
It doesn't take many clicks, right? Yeah.
So I'm not optimistic that that could happen.
But I do think we do have to get to the young people who are starting to vote. Like, I don't know, I mean, you have kids, but as soon as they pay taxes, their viewpoint, whew, that's a big change, right?
Yeah.
What am I paying for? Why am I paying so much? But I do think there is something there in our young people as they get to that vote. They need to start to understand how the services and everything they're counting on, how that is all, how it's all funded and jobs, right? So you're right. I mean, and I don't think we can get the clicks. We're trying. We're trying, aren't we, Trudy? We're trying.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Carmia Woolley with the BLM. I'm over here. So I'm a mother. I have kids. And I think it's great having a balanced conversation with them. Earlier, diversification was mentioned. So I'm curious how each of your corporations are diversifying, and how you think we can have a conversation about diversifying energy needs, beyond corporations.
So for us, for Chevron, we focused on, we say, let's focus on what we're good at. So we're not in the solar business. We're not in the wind business. We're looking at hydrogen fuels. We're looking at biodiesel jet fuels, looking in the CCUS part of our business. So that's where we feel like we bring the skill set and the needs. We like to say we do difficult, so let's go there. Others are already in. We're not getting into power generation. That's not what we do. So we are focused more on the energy sources. And then, of course, looking at our own business and how to continue to reduce those emissions on it. I mean, we have rigs out in West Texas that are off of windmill power. So we're not against renewables, We're talking about having some solar disk on our pond that could produce energy to help run the pumps. So, but as far as a corporation, our focus is on where we think we bring our talents in biomass diesel, things like that.
Yeah, I'd say that, a much smaller version of an oil and gas company than Chevron. Our focus is exactly the same. What are we good at? We are focused on producing safe, reliable, ever cleaner energy. That's what we do. We're the first net neutral carbon oil and gas producer in the state. And that does not come without tremendous creativity and innovation. We are always looking for opportunities to reduce our emissions, apply new technologies, and look how we can do our business in a more streamlined and with a smaller footprint. For those that we can't remove, for those emissions we can't remove, we buy offsets. But it's in our best interest to engineer out the emissions as much as possible. So that's where our real focus is. Producing the energy that society demands, but do it in an ever cleaner way.
I think in our case, we are installing a solar project, 13 megs, which will fire up about a quarter of our field supply of electricity. We didn't do that because we're good guys. We did that because, once again, technology came in front of us, and it's going to save us a lot of money by getting off the grid. So Excel was actually funded part of that, and we're going to be reducing our Excel bill by $250,000 to $400,000 a month by getting off their grid, which helps them and helps us, and it was a good solution. So good does come of all this, despite what's said. Good does come of all this if you pay attention and try to apply it to your business. But in all cases, when we make moves, it's economic related.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you all. This has been a really great conversation. Will Mixon, Office of State Planning and Budgeting. Question just kind of comparing states' regulatory structures. Texas, New Mexico has been mentioned, Utah as well. Just curious if you could talk high level how they differ from Colorado, very high level, I know there's, but, and if there are production decisions, investment decisions that are made or not made because of said structures.
I can tell you that investment decisions are made that way. So we had a recent permitting glitch in Colorado, and that rig's moving to Utah because Utah's ready for us. Is that the preferred way to work in our business? No. We wanted to run the rig that we had planned, and we couldn't get it done, and so Utah benefits. And difficulty with that is once it's in Utah, what's going to bring it back? So decisions are made based on what happens to us, and we have to act in the best interest of our shareholders. And that's a real life example of what can't happen.
To build off of David's point, regulatory predictability goes a long way. From an operations perspective, having steady state operations from a drilling and a completion, a construction perspective is a good thing. It's more operationally efficient, it's more capitally efficient, and it's safer, because ramping up activity and ramping down activity that's where you tend to have more incidents. So a steady state in a predictable regulatory environment allows you to run a much more steady state program. And when you do run into glitches and upsets, that does create some knock-on effect. Once equipment and services and vendors leave an area, really hard to bring them back. And that has impacts on future activities.
Yeah, and I would just, earlier, the comment was made around investors. And it is the question that we get more often from our investor relations team than anything else, is what's going on, how are the regulations, because investors are asking them. So it is being watched all the time.
Thanks so much. I think we're in the double red zone right now.
Is this the hook?
No,
It's the hook,
no, this
yeah.
is perfect. And
It's a great-
we had another right here, and y'all might engage him right after, and anyone else after we do here. We're going to go to our break. Have a round of applause for our industry leaders panel. Awesome, thank you.
Whenever Kirby starts speaking.